You've probably felt it. There's this feeling in the air, a sense that America is in some kind of crisis. But what is that crisis exactly? Well, the answer you get really depends on who you ask. So today, we're going to break down four totally different diagnoses of what's gone wrong. Okay, let's just dive right into the big question. Is America broken? What's so wild is that the answers aren't just a little different, they're often polar opposites. As we're about to see, what one person sees as a crisis, another might see as progress. One person's solution is another's absolute nightmare. So, in this explainer, we're going to neutrally lay out four distinct arguments from four different sources. By really looking at how they diagnose the problem and what they propose as a solution, you can start to see why the national conversation is so fractured, and why finding any common ground feels, well, pretty much impossible right now. So, where do we even begin? While our first diagnosis says the crisis isn't about some abstract idea, no, it's about something very real, very tangible, the physical safety and the constitutional liberty of every single citizen. This perspective comes from the YouTuber Abroad with Jay, an American who documents his life overseas. He frames the whole crisis around what he sees as state sanctioned violence and the chipping away of our basic rights. His point is brutally simple. If you can be killed for just, filming something or showing up to a protest, does the word freedom even mean anything anymore? And this really gets to the heart of his argument. This idea that our fundamental rights are being treated like revocable privileges. Things that should be rock solid constitutional guarantees are instead being treated like conditional perks that can be taken away whenever it's convenient for the people in power. So, what's the solution from this point of view? It's not about just rage quitting America, it's about making a clear, pragmatic choice to put your own safety and well being first. The advice is to actually look outside the US, do your homework, and maybe find a place to live that doesn't feel actively hostile to your existence. Okay, but what if the danger isn't about our physical bodies, but about our cultural identity? Our next diagnosis completely shifts the battlefield. We're moving from the streets into our schools, our media, and our institutions for what some see as a fight for the very soul of the country. Right, so this second viewpoint argues there is a full blown culture war happening, a war against what they see as traditional American values. And in their view, one side has been way too quiet for way too long. And this quote, for this perspective, this is Exhibit A. When a university professor is on record saying she hopes people seek to dismantle the country, it's not seen as just academic talk. It's seen as a literal declaration of war on the nation itself. And of course, that kind of statement provokes a really powerful response, like this one from the commentator Dapper Dev. It becomes a direct challenge. He's asking those who feel their culture is under attack, framing their silence not as being polite, but as being cowardly. So the solution offered here is really direct. It's confrontational. It's basically a call to arms. Wake up, speak up, and fight back. The core belief is that if you stay silent in a culture war, you've already lost. So we've seen a crisis of physical safety and a crisis of cultural identity. But our third diagnosis says, hold on, the problem isn't out there. It turns the camera lens right back around, focusing inward on one of America's biggest cultural forces to find a crisis of, well, hypocrisy. Yeah, this argument says there is a massive crisis happening inside evangelical Christianity, where what people are actually doing dramatically contradicts what they preach, especially when it comes to marriage. 50%. Yeah, according to one source, that is the divorce rate among many self-identified evangelicals, especially those who get married before they're 25. That's a number that's identical to, and in some cases even higher than, their secular neighbors. And when you look at the data, you find this really weird paradox. The so-called Bible Belt, the place with the highest concentration of evangelicals, also has the highest divorce rate in the entire country. And meanwhile, the Northeast, the least religious region, it has the lowest. So, what's going on? Why the disconnect? Well, according to this analysis, the problems are baked right into the culture itself. Things like purity culture, this intense pressure to marry super young, it's all seen as creating a recipe for disaster. So the fix, from this perspective, has to be internal. It's a call for the church to stop blaming individuals and to take a hard, honest look in the mirror at its own failures. It's about totally rethinking its entire approach to marriage, sex, and relationships from the ground up. And that brings us to our fourth and final diagnosis. This one also identifies a spiritual crisis, but it sees it as a cover story for a solution that would drag every single American into it, whether they like it or not. So, this diagnosis argues that some influential groups, often called Christian nationalists, believe America's biggest problem is something they call spiritual homelessness. And the cure, in their minds, isn't about personal faith. Nope, it's about national policy. And this is where we connect the dots from things that sound kind of nice to what critics see as their authoritarian endgame. A communal day of rest law is seen as a backdoor to mandatory church attendance. Building planned communities raises huge red flags about biometric surveillance to make sure everyone is towing the line. So, the ultimate goal here, as described by critics who are analyzing these plans, isn't to persuade people, it's to compel them. The vision is to replace our secular democracy with a form of Christian dominion, where one particular theology calls all the shots for the whole country. Okay, wow. So, we've just walked through four completely different, often contradictory stories about what's wrong with America: a crisis of safety, a crisis of culture, a crisis of faith, and a crisis of creeping theocracy. And this is where we hit the wall. This is the fundamental challenge. Each of these diagnoses leads to a solution that just can't exist with the others, right? You can't leave the country for your own safety and stay to fight a culture war at the same time. You can't impose a religious order on everyone while also trying to fix that same religion's deep internal problems. They just don't work together. And that leaves us with the biggest, most important question of all. Maybe the real problem isn't just what is wrong with America. Maybe the real crisis is the fact that we can't even agree on what the problem is in the first place. If we're all living in fundamentally different realities, how on earth can we ever hope to find a shared path forward?